Chris, I like to hear the minutiae of processes. So could you give any fun or absurd examples you experienced of rollbacking and/or the truth rundown that may illuminate dynamics between passing the buck to the source of n theta someone does a KR on and the self-blame game? Well, let me talk about my first example of getting what's called a rollback, and I'll explain what that is, and maybe that'll help answer this question. When I was staff in Santa Barbara, back at the Church of Scientology of Santa Barbara, back in the late 80s and early 90s before I joined the Sea Org, there was an issue that came down from Chairman of the Board, RTC, David Miscavige, who had announced tax exemption, and that was pretty much all my experience with the man in '93. So I think this was in '94. I think this was the next year, or maybe a little later after, maybe late '93, early '94, I think. And this issue that came down was a technical point. It had to do with, I won't get into the specifics of it, but it had to do with something that is done to help set up an auditing session with the meter and the cans and everything in Scientology. Miscavige was saying that everybody was doing this particular step wrong, and he was laying out why they were doing it wrong, how they were doing it wrong, and that every single person in the world who was trained on an e-meter had to redo the drills, the practical, practice of doing this particular step. They had to do it over again because they didn't get it right, and they were doing it, in fact, horribly wrong. And so everyone in the world had to redo this. And I was like, one, who's David Miscavige to tell me that? And two, I didn't think I was doing it wrong. So I kind of got the point of the issue, but I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And so I did what you're supposed to do when you get an order in Scientology that you don't feel is correct or just or right, which is I wrote an orders query back to David Miscavige, querying the order. I was like, I don't feel this is necessary. I don't feel the need to do this, and this seems to me to be a violation of another policy that Hubbard wrote called inspection before the fact, right? Which is, Hubbard wrote this policy that said that if something's working or moving or going along at a good clip and everything's fine with it, then don't step in and try to mess around with it or screw around with it, because you're just going to screw it up. You're going to make it work, or make it not work anymore. And so this was, in other words, you don't inspect something to find out what's wrong until after the fact of something going wrong, right? Which is not to say you don't do quality control or you don't keep up on things, but it's actually, not a bad point. If something's working fine, leave it the hell alone, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, whereas basically the policy. So I was using that as a basis of querying this order, because I said, well, I'm not broke, so why are you trying to fix me, right? Well, the response to this was 2 representatives from RTC came to Santa Barbara within about 2 or 3 days of me sending this orders query. And they were there in their full Sea Org uniforms and everything in order to set me straight and set the whole org straight on this point. Because who am I to query an order from David Miscavige, right? And of course, when I was still a staff member in Santa Barbara, this had quite an effect on me. 2 Sea Org members showing up who were, very, they were not messing around. They weren't there to be warm and fuzzy and cuddly. They were there to kick my ass, right? And they weren't yelling or screaming. They were like, yeah, we're going to deal with this. Yeah, you just have no idea what you're talking about, and we're going to deal with this, right? And the first thing they did was this woman took me up to an auditing room, put me on the meter, and she did what's called a rollback. Now, I could do a whole video on this, but basically a rollback is an investigation. It's a way of doing an investigation. And what you're trying to do is, Hubbard says that if you have someone, like a suppressive person, right, or a suppressive group, like the Psychs, or the FBI, or the IRS, or some group that's anti-Scientology, let's say, or some individual who's anti-Scientology, that person will spew lines. They will say things, right, that are against Scientology. They're called enemy lines, okay? Because they're an enemy, and these are the lines, these are the words that are coming out of their mouths. And these lines are phrases, basically. An enemy line is a phrase or a sentence or a concept that's communicated that is supposed to encapsulate an idea that would create disaffection or upset or doubt or fear or uncertainty on the part of the person who receives the enemy line. So in this particular case, sorry, before we get back to that. So what you do in what's called a rollback is there's this procedure where you put the person on a meter, somebody who, not the SP, you're trying to find the SP. You're trying to find out, where did this line come from? Where did this enemy line come from? Like you have a staff member who says, staff never get paid, right? Now it happens to be true, but to run around spewing that line creates disaffection, it creates upset, right? And the one thing they don't like in Scientology are critical remarks or statements that make people doubt or be uncertain about Scientology. So, if somebody said staff don't get paid, who would want to join staff? Nobody would want to join staff, right? Why would they? Because they're not going to get paid. And the whole line when you recruit somebody is, of course you'll get paid, and you'll get paid, as hard as you work is proportional to how much you'll get paid, right? Which is total horseshit. Staff don't get paid ever, like anything. Like it's so, like the number of times I got paid more than $100, I think I could literally count on one hand for the 8 or 9 years that I was staff at Santa Barbara. So it is definitely true that staff don't get paid. But to run around saying that, hey, it's not okay. So when a person's put on the meter who is saying these things, if nobody thinks that person is an SP, a suppressive person, a bad person, right, then they will ask the person, where did you get the idea that staff don't get paid, right? Where'd you get the idea to talk about that, to say that? And the person who's doing the investigation is supposed to roll back this line that this person has because, according to Hubbard, somebody fed it to him. Somebody gave him that line. Somebody made him think that. And the purpose of a rollback is to find out who that person was. And then go get that person and put them on the meter and do the same drill with them. Where did you get the idea? You told Chris that staff don't get paid, or whatever it is that he said. Maybe he said, maybe Chris is running around saying staff don't get paid, and it actually goes back to Bill, and Bill told Chris, well, Hubbard created a payroll system that ensures nobody gets paid, right? Maybe that was how that line came to Chris, right? And so they go grab Bill, and they sit him down, and they go, where'd you get this idea that Hubbard created a payroll system that nobody is ever going to get paid, right? And they get him to cough up on, he has to go, I had that idea when I didn't get paid. And they go, yeah, okay, but where'd you get that idea? Who gave you that idea? Who? It's not where did you get the idea, like from life or from your experiences. It's who gave you that idea? Who said that, right? It's all about finding the sources of rumors or rumor lines or enemy lines, right? And according to Hubbard, the idea is that somebody originated that. Somebody said that first. There's some person who started what Hubbard calls a black PR campaign against Scientology. And the idea is to trace it back to the person who first said it and declare them, show them up to be suppressive people and get rid of them so that they're not around anymore to spread their fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So, coming back to this experience with David Miscavige's orders, right, back in '93, this RTC person sits me down and says, so where did you get the idea to, query an order from David Miscavige? And I'm like, L. Ron Hubbard policy, like that's what it says to do. And she's like, yeah. And she goes, yeah, but what about David Miscavige? Where'd you get the idea that David Miscavige is not, and I was like, well, David Miscavige is not a tech person. He's the RTC COB, right? Chairman of the board RTC. He's not some guy who's supposed to be telling me what to do with Scientology tech, right? It's not his job. Yeah, but where'd you get that idea, right? Where did this idea come from? Just all curious, has me on the meter looking for, yeah, what's that? What's that thought right there? What's that, right? And I'm like, you know, this is the first time this has ever happened to me. I'm kind of like, you know, I don't know. You know, and, you know, I actually am sitting here right now and I don't actually totally remember what that went back to. It certainly did not go back to, although, I mean, we went around and around on this for about an hour, trying to find, you know, where this idea came from, that it was okay for me to send a query to an order from David Miscavige. And I think the reason I took this up and wanted to talk about this was not so much to tell you who the SP was or who the person was that I got this idea from, because that wasn't how it, you know, that's how Hubbard says it's supposed to be. That's not how it was. I was actually doing exactly what L. Ron Hubbard told me to do. And I thought this might be illustrative of how Scientology will twist, right? People in Scientology will take something Hubbard says and use it in a twisted fashion to create a mindset through the context of what they're doing to make you doubt what you have actually read from L. Ron Hubbard, right? So it's bad enough, all the things L. Ron Hubbard ever said to do, because he said to do all kinds of crap and all kinds of nonsense in his policies about how to run organizations. And it is true that staff don't get paid, right? And that is a direct reflection of L. Ron Hubbard's complete incompetence and inefficiency as an administrator and as a manager. He set this system up to fail for the staff, right? All the money from the churches are supposed to go funnel up to him. And so any policies, any directives, anything you hear from L. Ron Hubbard saying staff are supposed to get paid is total nonsense, right? It's just not true. But as a good staff member, as a loyal staff member, you listen to L. Ron Hubbard and you're supposed to believe this stuff. And then on top of that, you get David Miscavige, who's twisting things around even worse. And he uses this Hubbard rollbacking to twist your mind around even harder. It's even more of a pretzel by the time you're done with this, because I walked out of that interview questioning my entire life, right? Like, where did I get this idea? And David Miscavige, and clearly here's these two people from RTC who were like, you know, on me about this. I mean, they weren't messing around. And if I had made trouble or said, fuck you guys, you know, you guys are full of shit, right? Pardon my French. But if I had said that, their response would have been to, you know, slap me down and make me the suppressive person, right? I was in trouble. I mean, make no mistake. So I was very much trying to cooperate with this entire activity and trying to be good, right? And trying to be cooperative and trying to get my wits around what was going on that I did wrong. Because here's the thing, I didn't do anything wrong. But I was made to feel I did something wrong and had my mind twisted around this pretzel because this was a procedure, this rollback thing was something L. Ron Hubbard said to do. He's the one who came up with the whole idea. So RTC takes this and uses it to twist things around. So that's what I thought this might be, you know, a good example of. And, you know, the end result of it doesn't really matter. I got slapped down. I got, you know, all kinds of like twisty, whoa, and then they sat me down and made me do this technical procedure and proved to me that I didn't know how to do it, which was not true because I did know how to do it, but the guy was on me in such a way that he made me think I didn't because he was giving me a real hard time. And then they, you know, now with everybody all confused, and now the one thing that none of us, here's the thing, here's the end result of this. The one thing that I and every other staff member at Santa Barbara Org was absolutely convinced of by the time those two left was to never, ever question an order from David Miscavige. And that was the actual true end result of that little project from those two people from RTC. So if you're wondering how it works, how they do what they do, there's a good example of it.